All right, now that you've got Visual Studio 2017 installed, let's go ahead and start our first program. So just follow along with me. You should have a screen that more or less looks like this. You should, um, uh, I've got, you should have an option, like I prefer to use Visual Studio Dark. You should have defaulted with some shade of blue on your color theme. So I've gone ahead and taken dark here so that I find it to be less exhausting on the eyes. So here we go. To get a new project going on, we'll do File, New, Project, and for this class, we're going to be using the empty project option here. All right. Now I've gone ahead and set up a directory for our code repository. So you should default to your name, then source, then repos for repository. That should be your first directory. I've made a folder for this class, and you should do the same. Then I've gone ahead and made a folder for this project, and again, you should do the same. So right now, our project folder is empty. So I'll go ahead and select folder. I've called it project underscore 01. So that's our directory for the project. And I'm going to call this project our first program. Um, well, this is generally known as the Hello World project. Now there's a couple of options here. So one, you do want to create a directory for your solution. That absolutely is necessary. So you leave that checked. Source control, we're not using a source control in this class, but basically a source control would be a place where multiple people can see the code, but only one person can use it at a time. Go ahead and click OK. So this is going to start us off with this simple empty container for a project. We've got a set of references that's empty, external dependencies is empty, header files, resource files, and source files, all those are empty. All of these actually do mean something. So later on, much later on, you might be tasked to make a header file for a C++ project. Well, you would organize it by putting it in this folder. Resource files. So if your project needs to reference some text document, or if it needs to reference uh, anything that you could call a resource. Visual projects that have like a front end would you would have a photograph in there if you needed to use a photograph or an icon. And then there's our source files. Source means for source code. So let's right click the source folder, click on add, new item, and we're going to add a C++ file. The default name is source. We can leave it at that if we like, or we can change the name to something like hello world, something like that. And then we'll click add. So now we have this empty area right here. And notice that there's a number 1 on the side. Now, that's essentially numbering our lines of code. So you could put code here, more code, lots of code. And what that's going to translate for you is several lines of code. Why don't I just pull this out here so we can really see what's going on. So when we do assignments for me, we're going to start off with something like this. So what this is going to do for you is, or what it's going to do is identify who's writing this program, what class it's for, what week we're in. You could put the year, term, something like that. Project week one project or project one. Any of these descriptors will do. It's basically ensuring that when you turn in your project, we know exactly who it's from. So the first part of our C++ program is the include. We're going to include a library, and that library is called IOStream. What is IOStream? IOStream is the very basic item that it's a library of functions that allows C++ to take input and send output. If you think about every single program that you've ever used, the program takes input of some kind, processes that input in some way, and then outputs it yet again some way. A pretty basic item is signing up for Facebook. That's a program. You register for Facebook. It takes input. You type in your name, your email address, all those items in the text boxes, and then you submit it. So when you submit it, it does the processing. It takes the data from each of those text boxes and puts them in some database, and then that's actually the output. So the processing and the output are the same thing in that example. All right. So what do we do after the IO stream? The actual language of this is the preprocessor directive. Now, one thing that I'm going to point out in this video and throughout the class is that there's two ways to comment, and this way is a teaching comment. I'm teaching you that this is the preprocessor directive. All right. Next up is a namespace. All right. So IOStream handles what functions for input and output. The standard namespace um, basically assigns which characters we're going to use to make that happen. So I'll give you an example. So this is how our project's going to start. I'll give you that namespace example in a moment. Int main. All right. Every program has one main function. You know it's a function because it starts with a data type, int. It's called the main function. That's the header right here. And then this set of parentheses means it can take arguments. This main function has an empty set. It takes no arguments. But it's got int right here. And what does that mean? Int means that it returns something. It's a value returning function. And that value has to be of type int, which is shorthand for integer. So in order to satisfy this part, we need this part, return 0. Okay? So cout. Cout is a command that comes with IOStream, and it means C++ output. And we're going to put it, the default output is the screen. This is the insertion operator. The insertion operator comes with a standard namespace, and it is tied to the cout function. All right, quotations. If something's in quotations, that means it is a string. We're outputting a string to the output device. And one more thing that we're going to put in here, ENDL. It looks like it could be a 1, but that is the letter L. It means end line. End line comes with IOStream. The insertion operator is associated with the end line via the standard namespace. And what this does is this inserts a next line character, um, basically the return key on your keyboard at the end of my first program. So that's going to give us a space. Now I'm going to show you something here. There's a couple ways that we can get this program going. We can use the play button here to get it started, called the local Windows debugger, or we can use F5 on our keyboard. For simplicity's sake, since I'm zoomed in like this, I'm going to go ahead and use F5. Here's what happens. Project is out of date. Hello world debug Win32. What does that mean? That means when you created the project, it had some default settings, right? Now we've changed things by putting these items in here. So would we like to build it? Yes, we would like to build it. So here it comes. It starts with output down here. It gives us a console screen, and the console screen immediately disappears. Why is that? Well, the reason why is because it sent my first C++ program to the console screen. It sent end line to the console screen, and then it sent return 0. The main function terminated at return 0, which terminated the console screen. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to do something that's going to pause the screen. Now, there's a couple ways that we can do it. One of the more common ways is to use a system command, system pause. So system is an accessible function. It takes one argument, and if that argument is pause, it basically holds the screen until it gets more user input. So let's try that again. We'll hit F5. We'll say yes, we'd like to build it. And when we do so, now it says my first C++ program, press any key to continue. Now that press any key to continue is a direct consequence of our system pause. Now we got some diagnostic tools going on here. It looks like that keeping the program open is using up some process memory. That line is static, it's not going up or down, so it means that it's not increasing or decreasing. Once we hit enter, that ends, and we're back to square one. So let's take a look at this some more. Using the standard namespace. All right. So this bit of commenting I would call excessive because in the workplace, everybody knows exactly what these things are. So this program at some corporation, if the corporation was using a program that is this small, would actually not need any commenting at all. It's actually rather self-commenting. So these comments are not here for the program itself. They're actually there for you as a teaching device. I'll hold this on the screen for just a moment longer so that you can make sure that you've got your output done. All right, go ahead and submit this as your first assignment. Make sure that you've swapped in your name instead of mine. And then I'll give you basically, if you've got everything here, then I'll go ahead and give you full credit for the first assignment. And that is your first programming experience.